Hey friends, it's Spence. Welcome to Sphinx Reads and another Wikathon video. In case you don't know yet what Wikathon is, basically it's this Filipino-themed readathon hosted by your Tita Kate and Isa Not Bella for the entire month of August, where we highlight Filipino authors and their books. Links to all of the information, including reading and watching prompts, will be in the description down below. Today, I'm absolutely honored to have on the channel the author of one of my most anticipated releases of the year, Freddie vs. the Family Curse. As some of you may know, I'm usually not one to keep up with new releases, but after seeing a blog post from Shut Up Shalea, I just kind of felt drawn to this book. So without further ado, let's welcome author, lawyer, and cinnamon bun enthusiast, Tracy Badua.
Hey Spence, thanks for having me. Really excited to talk to you today.
Thank you so much for coming on the channel, Tracy. This is my first time interviewing an author, so I'm a little bit nervous, but also a little bit starstruck. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? But let's do it with a twist, okay? So tell us how you would be described by number 1, your main character, Freddie Ruiz, and number 2, our favorite Maltese, Sandy.
So I would probably think that Freddie would call me old. He is a 12-year-old boy, and I feel like anyone who is a little bit older than that, they would probably be like, oh, they're old. You know, like when they're like, oh, so-and-so was like practically a grandma. She was 40. So Freddie would call me old. And Sandy, my Maltese, she's about 10 years old, and she's actually sitting upstairs taking a nap. And she would probably call me the giver of treats, the provider of cuddles, and the person that accidentally nudges or kicks her once in a while when I forget that she is sitting under my desk when I write. She likes to sit there, and she's so quiet and so calm that sometimes I forget she's there, but I always make up for it. I give her, a treat and some cuddles, but I think that's how she would describe me.
That is so funny. Well, I also think that you are somewhat of a giver of treats, since you've given us the treat that is your debut novel. So let's talk about that. Tell us about your latest book, Freddie vs. the Family Curse.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk to you about my book. I actually have an advanced reading copy here. So my middle grade contemporary fantasy is called Freddie vs. the Family Curse, and that is Freddie right there. And Freddie is a 12-year-old Filipino-American boy who is cursed with bad luck thanks to a family curse that has haunted them for generations. And one day he's rooting around in his garage and comes upon an anting-anting, an amulet. So it's a gold coin. Again, it's on the cover, so it's really cool to see that on there. So he finds this amulet and thinks, finally my luck is about to change. And of course, he is wrong. Turns out the amulet holds the ghost of his great-granduncle, and together they must find a way to break the curse, or he gets stuck in the amulet with this ghost.
That sounds super exciting. And, to all of our viewers out there, if you haven't checked out Freddie vs. the Family Curse yet, hello, this is your sign. Honestly, I just love middle grade books in general, but, getting to see Filipino-American representation and references to Filipino folklore and history, it's just so nice to see, and I hope all of our viewers out there are excited about that. Now, there's so much I want to ask about your new book. So you mentioned an ancient amulet, or anting-anting, that Freddie finds that seems to carry either good fortune or bad luck. We don't really know until we read the book, right? So I wanted to ask, throughout your writing process, are there particular things or people who I guess just seem to bring you good luck the way that an anting-anting does?
So I wish it was as easy to have something that would be good luck when I write, but I have learned that I just need to sit down and write when I have the chance. I have a toddler, so a lot of that time that I used to spend, writing and reading and just kind of looking out the window and thinking of ideas, that is all gone. So I have to find a way to write and, do all this heavy kind of plotting and like character development like whenever I can. So it literally is like writing notes on my phone, finding a scrap of paper. I rely on notebooks more often because sometimes I can't reach for a laptop, or I shouldn't because then she'll start playing with my laptop. So it's really just making do with what I have. In an ideal world, my kind of best writing scenario, my good luck scenario where just words would flow would be to be quiet. I would have a nice scented candle going. I would have my laptop in front of me, and I would just be able to work. But that doesn't happen as often as I'd like anymore.
You know what? I totally get that. I'm sure a lot of our fellow writers out there just wish that there was just some sort of good luck charm that can help us, solve our writing problems. Now, let's talk about characters. From reading the synopsis of your book, I feel like Freddie's curse-free cousin Sharky is going to be a fan favorite. But I personally think that my favorite is going to be the spirit of Freddie's great-grand-uncle Ramon, who is apparently this super cranky and super rude guy. Can you tell us a little bit more about his character and kind of what inspired him?
I'm really glad you like Ramon. He was a lot of fun to write, and I tried to approach him from this perspective of if you were a teenager and you didn't really kind of get that whole all those lessons that you learned growing up about, oh, you shouldn't say that, that's really rude, or like, I can't believe that you would comment on something like that. He didn't get that chance because he got locked in the amulet. So trying to capture that kind of sheer honesty of his was a lot of fun, but also like I had to be careful that I wasn't making him just casually too mean to poor Freddie, who's already been through a lot. But, we all have those relatives that may be a little too forthright when we see them. You'll see them after a long time. They'll be like, oh, you gained weight. You're like, oh, thanks. Thanks, I guess. So, trying to capture that, but also just, keeping it middle grade, trying not to make it too mean. It was tricky, but it was a lot of fun. And with Ramon, he is a Philippine scout. And they are Filipinos who fought in World War II, and they were considered part of the U.S. Army. And this was a challenge to write because I had to do a lot of research on this. My own grandfather marched in the Bataan Death March, which is mentioned in the book. And he passed away a long time ago, so I really didn't get a chance to really get his take on his experiences, or, if he would have even wanted to talk about it, because these were such traumatic events. So trying to kind of capture that historical accuracy was tough because it's not something that we learn here in American schools. Like, I don't think I realized the depth of Filipino fighting in World War II until I was an adult, when I started kind of really researching these things on my own. So I had to look into the Philippine Scouts and like the different ways that Filipinos would fight for their homeland during the World War II kind of era and during the Japanese invasion. And then I talked to a lot of, my older relatives about what they went through. My grandmother provided a lot of her own experiences that kind of get woven into the book as well. And I reached out to a couple of Philippine Scout and veterans organizations here in the U.S. just to try to figure out, little things about like how realistic is it that Ramon would, be a teenager and enlist? Like, would he have to lie about it, or was it common that somebody his age would sign up and want to fight? So Ramon was one of my favorite and trickiest characters because it was really important to me to get it right.
I love that. I love that you took so much care in writing this character who, on the surface can seem like just this really rude guy, but, behind all that, there's a lot of, depth and history that's, made him who he is. I personally don't even know much about Philippine Scouts, so I'm excited to, learn more about them through your book. Now, one important theme discussed in your book is the experience of many children of immigrants, right? So now, obviously, not everyone can relate to that experience, myself included. So I guess, what are some things you hope that your book conveys to people within and outside that experience?
I think one of the things that I want people reading this book to see is just the experience of growing up in a multi-generational household. It's not so common here in the U.S. to have, grandparents or, other elders living in the house, but that's kind of how I grew up. I had family over all the time. My grandmothers lived with us for a while, and then they would go and hang out with my other cousins for a couple months. So I had that lovely experience of having so many people of different generations in my life growing up. And that's kind of one of the things that I wanted to showcase in this story. And then another thing is the fact that there are big differences between being a Filipino American born and raised and a Filipino in America that, was born and raised in the Philippines. And Freddie's household kind of shows some of those differences. Like, he and his parents were both born and raised in the States, and they are a little skeptical of some of the kind of folklore and superstitions that his great-grandmother brings to the table. So she was someone who was, in the story, came from the Philippines to the U.S. and holds a lot of kind of those fun background traditions and superstitions that she is trying to impart to the younger generations, and it's tough for them to accept it. So what I wanted to show was really kind of the depth of viewpoint that could even come from the same household. Just because someone is from the same place or looks the same doesn't mean they will think the same and act the same in any given situation. So that's kind of one of the things that I wanted to show in the book, was just that, these characters are all different, and that's pretty representative of any household where you've got a whole mix of people who have grown up in different ways and in different locations.
I really, really love that. Often in discussions where we call for diverse representation in books, we tend to forget that, while certain groups have, shared experiences, the people within those groups, they're still individuals with unique circumstances and different personalities. So I'm really glad that your book highlights that, in such a way that is accessible even for younger readers, right? And speaking of your book being accessible and relatable, I think it's apparent that, to write it, you didn't just draw from, Philippine history and culture, but obviously also from your own experiences. Now, one funny line from the book is, "Look with your eyes, not with your mouth," which you said is something that your own grandma used to say to you. So I guess, what is one other thing in your book that is directly pulled from or inspired by something that you've experienced?
That's so funny that you liked the "look with your eyes, not with your mouth," because I feel like everyone's grandmother or grandfather or whoever, like they have definitely said that to young people before, when they're like, "Look, I don't want to get up. Like, just go look for it. It's up to you. You're the one with the problem." So another thing in the book that is kind of inspired by real life was the ginger that they used to wrap one of the characters' sprained ankles. When I was a kid, my brother and I were like playing around in the field at school, and he twisted his ankle a little bit, like when he stepped into kind of a hole in the field. And when we got home, I remember my parents getting, just kind of some like medical wrap and then some ginger, just like sliced ginger, and wrapping his ankle in it. And I remember the smell. So that's one of the things that kind of stuck out in my mind. And I mention it in the book because when this character sprains their ankle, and the person that is trying to help them recover from it is someone with that same kind of like folk healing, kind of old world methods mindset, like that's what they go to first, is the wrapping it up in ginger.
I love that. I personally haven't even experienced that, but I know that, when I have a really high fever, my mom, chops up some onions and puts them inside my socks to absorb, body heat. So I can definitely relate somewhat to that. So I guess to kind of wrap us up, it seems that you are on a roll when it comes to writing. You already have another book coming out soon, which is completely different from Freddie, right? It's young adult contemporary, it's about a friendship breakup, and it's called This Is Not a Personal Statement. What can you tell us about this new book, and what word of advice could you give aspiring Filipino authors like me?
So my next book after Freddie is actually a young adult novel. Like you said, This Is Not a Personal Statement, and it's coming out in January 2023. And it follows a 16-year-old girl who goes off to the college of her dreams, moves into the dorm, says goodbye to her parents as they drive away, goes to class, makes friends. Turns out she's not actually accepted to the school, so she's basically trying to fake it till she makes it or gets caught. So that is what is coming out in a few months after Freddie. And that's exciting because it's going from, middle grade, which is geared towards younger readers, 9 to 12, and then young adult, which is that older set. So that was a lot of fun to write, and allowed me to really kind of get more in the serious headspace for that. One word of advice I would give to Filipino authors, though, especially writing this young adult, is don't feel pressured to write something that would be representative of all Filipino or Filipino American experiences. Kind of, as I mentioned before, we're all different, and people need to see that. People need to see the different kinds of experiences and mindsets that we have. So, for example, in Freddie, you've got Freddie who believes in the family curse, and you've got his parents who don't believe in the family curse. So little things like that, where it's just like we're in the same household, but we have vastly different views. And then same with my young adult that's coming out, is she goes to a very hyper-competitive school, is very driven, a lot of pressure to succeed academically. And that may not be true of all Filipino or Filipino-American households. Like, it was definitely true of my characters, but the last thing I would want is someone to walk away from this book thinking like, oh, all Filipino-American kids are like this. All of them, work really hard in high school and do this and this and this. No, like, this is the experience of this one character. So same, like we wouldn't do that to any other kind of book where you would pick up like a romance novel and be like, oh, okay, so this couple's experience is representative of everyone in that culture. They all fall in love like this. So I think it's just, it's silly to think that our books have to be everything to everyone. So I hope for you aspiring Filipino and Filipino-American authors, you're writing the book and like the story that you want to tell with the characters that you want. Don't feel pressured to live up to some standard or portray your characters a certain way to kind of anticipate what readers are going to try to think of your character to try to fit them in a mold. So that would be my advice to you.
Thank you so much, Tracy. It was so much fun talking to you, and you are truly an inspiration for all of us Filipino readers. That is it for today, folks. Tracy Badua's newest middle grade book, Freddie vs. the Family Curse, is available everywhere books are sold. Let me know in the comments your thoughts on the book or any other kind messages you'd like me to relay to Tracy. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that you can see my next Wikathon video. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day.